How is it going, everyone? I am doing a video very different than what I usually cover. This is quasi-political, but it's going to be looking at this kind of more from a systems perspective, some ethical questions, and there was a video from Dino, who I am friends with on the TikTok, that got me thinking on this a little bit. So, and then went down a couple more, and Spirit has kind of said some things to me that I should go ahead and address. And I'll preface this that my bachelor's degree is political science. I almost went into constitutional law. And so we're just going to go into it, and it's like, I'm not going to be channeling like I usually do, but there are some things, kind of insights that will be coming in, and I'm just going to throw them in there. Let's start with no matter what, you're left, right, Democrat, Republican, in this conversation, in the end, that doesn't really matter as much. This is going to be about kind of what is the process when the federal government has gone so tyrannical or not responding to the American people. I'm going to start with the systems that are leading to where we're at, and then how I see it, the only remedy that exists right now based on these conditions. And then we're going to talk about ethics and AI and the other systems that are being implemented, from what I'm being shown, a very different way. Even though it's like Dino, who I follow on here, is right that the term artificial intelligence has been around since the 50s. And we're going to get into a piece that teeters on Area 51 as part of explaining the system that we have in place. Okay. So right now, like for people who are upset about issue X, issue Y, just name a myriad of issues that really benefit everyone, and then seeing what issues are being used kind of to divide us. And in the end, all this is going to synthesize together. So bear with the logic playing as we go 3 different tracks to get to the end here. And I'm going to try to make this brief. The things you have to consider is, one, does the president really have control of everything, and does Congress? And if not, what and whom has that authority? And one of the questions then you have to look at to follow that, there are things that are off-listed on the budget. So if you were to look up a budget of Congress and passed by a president or signed by the president, you're not going to see everything. Certain things, especially when you're looking at things, State Department, CIA, CENTCOM, what have you, there are things that are off budget or black budget, in a sense. Or they may use a different term now. That was what I learned when I did political science. And that stuff is not made available to the public for operations that, if found out, could cause significant embarrassment and or have ramifications on our economic system if it involves various companies and industrial complexes. That's one piece. Then there's the other piece. And this kind of came strong. So we're going to start with a question of that, and I'm going to leave that open-ended, and then we'll continue. The other piece to consider, if the central bank, in the countries that have a central bank, if there is a guideline to control what people are doing, and those presidents that wanted to audit or get rid of the Fed, question I would ask you to answer is, what happened to those presidents? That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece, and you have to look at a case precedent that was applied incorrectly, that caused the decision from Citizens United, and to make money more of a premise of being in campaigns, even if not from an individual or a company. You have to go to the Union Pacific versus Santa Clara Valley Authority court decision. And back at that time, this would have been in the 1870s when this was decided. I believe it was 1876, if I remember right. If I'm wrong, it's because I'm pulling out of the vault because I covered this, 30 years ago? Almost 30 years ago. The court clerks would write the decision, not the justices themselves at that time. And there was some words inserted that when looking at historical anthropologic evidence, this was not what the justices had said. But they inserted the words corporate personhood. And so corporate personhood pretty much said that corporations or anything that is a corporation has the same rights to speech and everything in the Constitution that an individual taxpayer, landowner at part of that time would have, without the consequences when it comes to if you commit a crime. You can't send a corporation to jail. But that set a precedent that went forward, and that was one of the things used in determining the Citizens United decision, and even the latest Supreme Court decision that pretty much just is now open-ended money from wherever, and even opens up where foreign entities can now put money into elections. Then add that now you can bet on elections and all that stuff, a separate thing with Kalshi, and then follow the rabbit hole of Kalshi, who runs it, all that stuff. It'll all tie in here in a minute. Then add when you have people in Congress that are more focused on their career than what they were there to do. They start taking the money in because they want to be a career politician. They want to be rich. Self-interested, that part of the human condition is mostly true. So Marx and classic liberalism were both correct on the general assumption for human will. Self-interested. Are they going to answer to the citizens that don't really show up to vote and seemingly are suppressed from information? We'll get to another why there in a minute. Or the people who are funding their campaigns, and if they tick them off, then they don't have anything. And then they lose. They can be primary, whatever. Add to that another important change. This happened during the Clinton years. It was the Telecommunications Act of 1996. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 changed the fairness doctrine when it comes to journalism. And I was a meteorology major and I had to cover this part very specifically in my first meteorology class because it was a news media class. And so infotainment can be counted as news, not subject to libel or slander, even if it's character assassinating someone, is part of the ramifications. It also meant that you can have a political ideology tied to the news. So that's why you have Fox News, MSNBC, even CNN has their own ideological lens. From those of us who have political science degrees, minuscule difference. They're part of the same bird. And then how that ties into elections. So it squelches out independent thought. It's kind of national, and then not allowing more consolidation in the news media was also allowed in the Telecommunications Act of 96. So you have fewer news outlets. There's less competition of evidence and information. So you're not getting as many viewpoints. And that consolidated power also squelches independent media. It squelches local media. So think about that as a system and what that does to the electorate. Now, let's tie in all of our systems. We have the whole thing talking about climate change, whether you believe it or not, global warming, whatever what have you. There have been changes to like longer drought periods, longer duration between rain events. What's causing that? And I would look up the Brenner report happened at the end of the Obama administration, in aerosols being used in the atmosphere and an additive to jet fuel. Chemtrails is what some people call it. And then look at what the purpose of that was. But then let's add some physics in here. You add a ferric compound, which is an aerosol that helps block out some of the sun coming in. In physics equation, okay, you're blocking some of the sun. What else does that do? So even if you have a calm wind and you have radiational cooling, the heat rises back up the ground and you get those really cold nights in valleys. That happens less of a magnitude because of the aerosols that are in the atmosphere, because it's at that altitude. You haven't gotten into the stratosphere yet. It's the upper part of our main atmosphere. So that raises the overall average temperature and the ambient temperature, which is more harmful than if we had 140 degree high temperatures and we still had a normal winter. So another piece to think about systems wise, why are we doing that? And agricultural production. Let's throw in another part, glyphosate. I did not know this, and I should have with my study of physics and meteorology before I went to political science. A desiccant is something that it's designed to dry something out. So it has a drying component to it. And in industrial agriculture, glyphosate is commonly used. It's a pesticide fertilizer. It helps keep the pest off. But it also dries out the soil. It bleaches it in a sense. Not necessarily scientifically accurate way of saying it, but the effect is there. And then what is that doing when we have longer duration between rains and you now have drier soil if we start losing some of these inputs, what does that do to the food supply? What does industrialization of food, and then you add the way we do energy, industrialization of energy that happened, especially after World War II, thinking about everything as a top-down system. And what does that do when a part breaks? What does that do when there is a finiteness to it? And that Tesla's free energy technologies did not make the light of day because Edison made sure of it. Side point. So think about that system, or think about the healthcare system, or think about who Congress is responding to in all these systems. Think about the algorithms of social media, the algorithms that some of the AI is doing, and who is supporting it. And like bigger picture, not like I support it in my community. It's like what people who fund campaigns, what companies, what industrial complexes are doing it. Is there anything else that's being tied to that in this new kind of a shift in the increase of the number of data centers, which partially is social media, that is true, but there's other things as Dino said. So from an ethics in a systems perspective, what is it doing? And the type of information that's being disseminated. It's like the algorithms are tied to be more negative because people tend to doom scroll when there's things more negative, and they tend to consume more. They tend to stay on more with a negative emotional response than they do positive. And there's been a lot of psychology studies on this. So add that, and then let's throw this other little caveat just for fun. Dr. Emoto was a physicist in Japan and talked about the properties of water. So do the short version of this because it's already getting long. There was this pond in Osaka, Japan, and it was full of pond scum, algae, a toxic algae specifically. And he wanted to do it because they tested the crystals, so they froze the water, what crystals were. Essentially, no crystal was formed on this. So his thought was the energy that's input into water, the more pure that energy and that intent is into water, the more perfect the crystal is. So they did and when you do the word love in the most unconditional sense of it, that word and the frequency of it being transmitted from someone or a group of people, as they learned in this experiment, purified the water with no other changes to the condition. They did it in a season. So that way there wasn't any of these big shifts that were going on. So they'd have a control group for this. And so have that in water towers or have that disseminating in data centers and going near infrastructure. And it's like that frequency, even if you can't feel it, see it, it's still going through you. So what impact is that having on people's nervous systems, on their mental health? As a system, what is it trying to do and when you're thinking in a top-down lens. And think about who supports Iran, and it's both parties, by the way. And so one problem is ethics. The other problem is the systems that are in place, and the systems, I would argue, are functioning exactly how it was designed. It was not designed for the individual. It wasn't designed for the communities. It was designed for control, is what I conclude. And I invite you to research everything, your conclusions. That's very important. This is not me saying I'm right, you're wrong. It's just giving another way of looking at something. So now let's get to the conclusion. If all these systems are in place, and even if we voted President Trump out, we voted out Congress and changed it, will it change anything fundamentally? And when you look at decades and decades, it's like these nominal on social issues and whatnot, maybe a little bit on economics, which companies are going to benefit, which ones are not. But especially since the Vietnam War, and how has that benefited all of us? And then I would argue it's like, look at more people are paycheck to paycheck, including myself. And it's like, is it really benefiting everyone? So if it doesn't matter at the federal level who you vote for and going after that, what are the remedies from a systems perspective? Well, there's one tool, difficult and easy at the same time. Article 5 lays out, in the event of a tyrannical government, but it can be used for other purposes too, you get, all you need is 2/3 of the states to call a constitutional convention, but you need 3/4 of the states to ratify. So let's just say, just for the sake of it, we can get 3/4 of the states to call for a constitutional convention, all be in agreement and ratify. They can do something about the current situation, and they could even do something about the black booked items and things that are not being disclosed to the American public. And there wouldn't be much they can do about it. I mean, they may very well. That's another ramification, but it is the only thing that's constitutionally prescribed, and there's no one on the airwaves talking about it. I think I've heard one person casually mention, but that is one of the mechanisms of how the Constitution, the checks and balances work. So and then the second part is kind of tied to the first, because you have to use the same approach. Local, grassroots, bottoms up. If both parties are bought and sold, or following the money, which it's not from us, then you have to work on local, you have to work on movements. And here's the part that's controversial. If it goes to revolution's not going to be online. With AI, the surveillance infrastructure that's being placed down, and look at all the various bills, look at kind of the surveillance and intelligence things being combined. There's a system to that too. It ties into everything I just said, or laid out. You have to start local. You're going to have to start networking with people. Your neighbor's not your enemy. And focus on those things that are going to make your community better. And then so then adding the spiritual sense of it, like frequency, like thought process, like minds. And then you get those similar, and you start building that coalition from the bottom up. We have a real world example of this. Seattle, Washington, former city councilor Sharma Savant won all of her elections. She faced a recall. She was the only one that was a declared socialist on the Seattle City Council. Yet she got more things through building that coalition, a real coalition, not that I'm the leader, it's me. She was a delegate to the people that put her into office, and she acted as such. And it'll be interesting to see if she ends up getting into Congress. I think one vote like that will work. I mean, look at some of the things that Thomas Massie was able to stop, and to the Easting, I don't even think I can say that word on the TikTok, act to disclose the documents. Wouldn't have passed if it wasn't for Thomas Massie. Whether you agree with him or not, irrelevant. It's like he was one of the ones showing one person can make a hell of a lot of difference in Congress, but you hit a line. He's not going to be in Congress after this term. So those are things you have to think about. If you put all of your stuff online, if you, about all that, you're going to be surveyed, and think of flock cameras and what they can do and how they can pick up, and that they're vulnerable with how the infrastructure's been put in on these systems. They can track all of that and all the other apparatus that intelligence would have, NSA, what have you, that is not being just used on people who are potentially enemy combatants. And the T word, I'm not even sure I can say that word on here, so I'm not going to. It ends in ist. Think of Jeff Dunham and Ahmed, if you want to get a bigger clue, if I need to make it more obvious. And so they're going to be bottoms up movements. And then you have the other big in social theory, critical mass. You get to a 30% threshold, you can make change. But that's not going to be all of us, the behemoth going against the federal system, not with the set of checks and balances. You have to use the leverage to check and balances if you're going to go that strategy. But you've got to start and build all that local. And it's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately. I wish it would, but it's not going to. So that lays out kind of the things. It's like, and then even glancing on the ethics of AI and how the tools are being used now, it's like, it's something that should be of concern, but this is kind of what Spirit wanted me to give, kind of a map of how you would achieve that. So hopefully that is helpful. If you have any questions or pick my brain on anything, please let me know and I can put that. I'm not going to put anything in the lens of I'm right, you're wrong, or oh, that's stupid. That's not my approach. My framework of me saying this is giving another way of thinking about it and adding a systems flair to it. And then to even think of how systems more rudimentary are, look up Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai on YouTube or whatever platform. He's running for Senate in Massachusetts as an independent, but he is one that I got introduced by a friend on thinking things from a systems perspective, which those of us that have the neurodivergency of some sort or the autism do better thinking in systems. So it's just something to think about. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. All right, bye for now.